Welcome to Ace of Pentacles, your career strategy and workplace wellness podcast. I'm your host, Sara, and I'm so happy you're here. Join me every week as we investigate how people design and discover their way through their careers. Together, we'll explore the science of well-being at work and discover tools and strategies to help us do well and be well. Hi, everyone. Today, we're joined by Dr. Leighann Rechtin. Leighann is a dynamic learning and development consultant with a rich background spanning corporate, academic, and nonprofit sectors. Leighann specializes in building people-first talent strategies that drive transformation from leadership development and succession planning to systemic change and instructional innovation. With a deep expertise in communication, curriculum design, and strengths-based development, Leighann empowers mission-driven organizations to cultivate inclusive learning cultures and strategic growth. Outside of work, Leighann is a passionate advocate for women in leadership, a mentor, a community leader, and a devoted soccer mom and book lover. Let's go ahead and dive in with Dr. Leighann Rechtin.
Excellent.
Leighann,
Thank you,
hi.
Sarah. Hi. Yeah, great to be with you today.
It's so wonderful to have you. I was just thinking this morning about the really moment where you made a really big impact on how I understood my strengths. So I'm really excited to talk about CliftonStrengths with you today. I'd like to let our listeners know the reason why Leighann is on the podcast today is because we went through the Gallup training together for CliftonStrengths, and we are both certified coaches. And Leighann there was a moment in that training where Leighann helped me really quickly reframe and think differently about my own strengths. And she's someone who is very knowledgeable about CliftonStrengths, about the framework, and uses it quite a bit. And so I wanted to talk to her about how she's used it, how clients of hers have used it, and how it's brought value to them.
Excellent. But we could talk for hours about it.
We really could. It's so deep, the knowledge that you can get from using your strengths and the value that it drives. It's, I think, especially right now, very relevant. So Leighann, let's start here. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey. You are such an accomplished individual. I'd love to hear, in your words, tell our listeners a little bit about your path to where you are today.
Sure. And I will probably refrain from adding too much about my background in strengths or what my strengths are right now. So just a little bit about me. I have really a passion for education. I joke with people that it might be my vice, but of a bunch of vices, I'll take that one. So I have spent decades in higher ed at this point. I was kind of figuring out what I wanted to do as an undergrad and had this calling. I felt this passion to teach, and actually it does connect with my strengths as I've reflected back on that. But I took a block of elementary ed classes and I thought, no, this is not the teaching for me. So I was finishing my undergrad and I took a class in training and development. And I thought, this is awesome. This is what it is. So I went into the corporate world and did that for a little while and loved it, and then started teaching just for fun on Saturdays, public speaking for an undergraduate institution. And I thought, oh, I really love this. I think I want to do this maybe. So I networked with people because those are aligned with my strengths as well, figured out how can I teach more. And so I taught full-time public speaking and communication courses. So interpersonal communication, small group. And throughout all of that, though, I was consistently learning and growing and developing myself. Surprisingly, I will say this learner has never shown up on my top 5 strengths, but I think I leverage that in other ways. So I really got to the point with teaching that I thought I'd really maximized, which is funny because that is one of my top 5. I really maximized where I felt like I could most impact, and I was ready for the next challenge. Then I switched kind of back into learning and development. So really thinking about learning and development and growth of employees instead of being student facing. And then this past summer, I kind of switched again, maybe like a partnership of the two. So now I am teaching in a doctoral program, actually the program that I graduated from. So it's really a combination of leadership and development and learning all throughout my career.
Wow, wonderful. Leighann, I can kind of guess this, but what first drew you to CliftonStrengths?
Yeah, so funny enough, I first took the assessment when I was leading a retreat. And so they wanted all the leaders to take the assessment. And this was actually a couple decades ago now. And I thought, okay, another assessment. Again, I love learning. All right, great. So I did. I took the assessment and was first really, I don't think shocked is the right thing. It was really for me more validating, like, well, this makes sense. Yes. And so from there, going back to talking about when I was looking for a full-time role in teaching, when I went for the interview for that role, they ask the question, which you're asked in almost any interview, right? What are your strengths? And a lot of people don't necessarily have a vocabulary to talk about that. They'll say things like, I'm good with people or I'm organized. And that's great. But having taken the assessment and having done a little bit with it, leading students through the assessment at first, I realized that I had a different language. So I said, I'm not sure if you're familiar with, they've gone through different iterations of names. So I think at the time it was called, I don't know, Gallup Strengths or something anyway. And now it's CliftonStrengths for Don Clifton. So I said, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but here are mine. And they said, oh, we're a strengths-based institution, which was really cool because it made me feel that connection to the organization right away and validated that I would want to be a part of that organization as well. But then they were able to understand my strengths a little bit differently, which was great. And so from there, I used strengths in the classroom when teaching public speaking. Students' first speech was to take the assessment and then give their introduction speech on their top 5 strengths, which was really very impactful for students. And so I just kept utilizing the assessment from there and seeing it differently in my own mind.
Yeah. Yeah. A couple of things that you touched on there that I think are really important. I'd like to highlight those. One, my guess was going to be when I was like, I can probably guess what drew you to this. It's that I think people who are really into learning and really like to learn are constantly kind of seeking, like, what are new things that I can learn about myself? And so I actually took it the first time in an organization that I was with and instantly was like hooked. And I was like, this is so cool. The thing that intrigued me most about it was I never knew how to talk about my strengths. It's a question we get all the time. And a lot of people, one, it's like this humility, I think, that we have around it, where we need to be humble about our strengths, but also we genuinely lack the language to be able to talk about what we do well because we don't see it. And so I love this assessment because it gives you that mirror. And when I took it, it was called StrengthsFinder. So a lot of people know it as StrengthsFinder. And the last thing I want to touch on that you mentioned, it is shocking to me how many people and how many organizations are familiar with this framework and how many organizations actually use it. So I always tell my clients, when you're going into an interview, if you can speak their language and you can speak the language of strengths, one, it makes you sound super intelligent and self-aware, but also it might be an organization that's very familiar with it, or at the very least, the person that's interviewing you is familiar with it. And they're like, instantly, it's like this, to me, it feels like the equivalent of saying you're part of some kind of sorority or some kind of like club or whatever in college, where instantly people are like, oh yeah, these are my top 5. So it instantly kind of builds that bond.
Yeah, absolutely. I love all those connections.
Yeah.
So spot on. And yeah, I couldn't remember that it was called StrengthsFinder. I was like, there's so many names. So thank you for
Yeah.
reminding me of that.
Yeah, it's gone through a few iterations. Can you share with us your top 5 strengths? I know Maximizer is one of them.
Yeah,
Mine
I
is
know.
too. Yeah. And
Which
how
is
do you
kind
use those?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So the very first time I took it, I got the one, whenever I'm working with clients, I will say things like, try to refrain from having strengths envy. And I got the one that most people, if they have strengths envy, it sort of is this one, which is kind of funny to me because it's the only one that's an acronym of all 34 and it's WOO, which I hate what it stands for. It stands for winning others over. It seems really superficial. A lot of people struggle with that when they get it. Like, I'm not fake, but I like to think of the automatopoeia of WOO, like woo, right? You're typically going to be a higher energy person, really like meeting new people and making connections. And yes, I have been this way my entire life. And so just my quick thing on Woo, I have taken the assessment over 7 times now. And I do want to say that Gallup does say the first time you take it is the most authentic because you don't have that bias. So typically you don't know what all 34 are that first time you take it. And so then if you take it again, you kind of have a little bit more of a bias. So recognizing that. Every time I've taken it, I have gotten woo as the top. Even when I'm like, maybe I can calm it down. No, it just naturally, it just comes up. So it was my number one. Positivity has shown up most consistently as well with woo as my number two. The first couple times I took the assessment, empathy was in my top, but I do think from teaching, I really had to coach my empathy down. Like, I hate to say down, but like suppress it to help me not be overcome by my empathy when teaching. So positivity showed up in its place, makes perfect sense to me because I can reframe very easily. In fact, I really struggle when I can't reframe a situation fairly quickly. So positivity and woo there together, and then maximizers, my third one. And you know, Sarah, how that one, I don't know how it shows up for you. For me, it's in like always trying to think about ways that things could be done a little bit better, which can sometimes show up for other people as a perfectionism, and it's not. And so I have to be really clear about, oh, I'm not ever looking for perfect. I'm just always thinking about how can something be a little bit better? What, next time we do it, what can we do differently? And how it's really an efficiency type of thing as well for me. So if I'm standing in a long line, I'm like, what could they do to make it better? Right. So that's how it shows up. And then I also have, and these have shown up a few times, strategic is my fourth. And that one isn't always in my top five, but it definitely shows up when I'm taking the assessment from thinking about myself as a leader. And so I get strategic, and that makes perfect sense. Strategic is that strength that will help me filter very quickly. So there might be a bunch of things, and I'm like, well, this one. And it's really tough though, because when people have strategic in their top five, a lot of times they can see how they got to that thing, but they have to help other people understand their pathway or what led to that. And with strategic, you have an A through Z plan. So that's kind of without even realizing it. And then activator, which that one has, again, I've seen that one come up in my top five quite a bit. It's the one that I feel causes me the most pain, only because activator, the shadow side shows up very quickly, which can be sort of impatience. And so I'll talk about this, I think now, is that it's helpful, I think, to think of strengths as though maybe they're on a stove top. And when we're operating in a place that's good, that's helpful to us, a lot of times we're at kind of that medium setting on the stovetop. Our strengths are kind of medium. There are times that we can dial it up. And when we dial up our strengths, we might be leveraging them too much. And so we have to think about that, how they might show up to other people, or we might even be getting in our own way because we're dialing in too much to that strength. We can also dial them down too much, and then it feels very inauthentic to who we are. So activator is one that I have to really pay attention to because I think it can show up for me. It will come as impatience. And so then I have to leverage my other strengths like maximizer and strategic to help me be less impatient, perhaps. If I'm in a meeting that feels pointless, I have to think about okay, well, if this feels pointless, what can I do to help it be a little bit more productive or to help my mind stay focused?
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for that really detailed overview of your strengths. You're so aware. I mean, I'm not surprised because I've worked with you, and it's amazing to see someone talk about their strengths at that kind of level of understanding. So, I've actually taken the assessment I was going to say twice, but actually three times in 12 years. And I've gotten all five every time the same,
In
which
the same.
is, yeah. Well, not in the same order.
Oh,
Not in
okay.
the same order. But the top five are always my top five are always my top five. My top 10, there's like new ones sometimes, and like, the or 6 to 10, there's new ones, but my top five are always the same: strategic, relator, maximizer, connectedness, arranger. And everything you said about maximizer and activator, because that usually shows up in my top 10, very much resonated with me, because people think when you have maximizer in there, it's like you're never happy. It's never good enough for you. You're never happy. That's really hard.
Yeah, it's really hard to lead other people with that one
Yeah,
because
yeah,
they
absolutely.
think like, gosh, she's, impossible to please, and that's not the case.
Yeah. So I really like your example of the stovetop. You can, when you're at that medium, you're good, and then you can turn it up and dial it down. The other thing that you said that I want to touch on is strengths envy. And I remember when you shared in our group that you had woo, I was like, I wanted woo. I've always wanted woo. I'm like, I always want woo. But yeah, I remember the first time I took it, I was like, that seems like a really nice one to have.
It's fun, just it can be a lot for other people. So it definitely has its shadow sides as well.
For sure. I think they all do, right? Leighann, can you tell us a little bit, just for those who don't have any idea what Clifton strengths are, can you give us a quick overview of what it actually is?
Yeah, definitely. So it's an assessment that is backed by decades worth of research. So it was heavily researched before it was ever even launched, and through the Gallup organization, which is a very well-known organization for exactly that, for their reliability and validity and assessments. And that's something that really, again, taking it a couple times, and I love that you said you've taken it a few, and you said over 12 years, and that's same for me, like 7 over 20 years. And it is something that you don't want to take it like next week again, right? But if you've maybe had time has passed, or there's been a job change or a life change, it is helpful sometimes just to see, are things showing up the same or not? And that does throw people off because they think, well, if this is accurate, shouldn't I be getting the same thing every time? Well, what I love about two main things that I love about the assessment and really the research that supports it is one, it's focused on what we do well. And a lot of times in our lives, especially in our culture, we're just encouraged to focus on weaknesses and how we can improve and how we can get better and do this and you'll be better and your life's going to be great. And you're thinking, I can't do all these 25 things at one time to make my life better, because that's kind of what that weakness fixing tends to include, some sort of product that's going to help us. And so what I most love about it is it's not about that at all. It's about seeing the things that you do well. In fact, for a long time, the organization said, you're only going to get your top 5. I think it costs like around $20 to take the assessment, but we're just going to give you your top 5 out of 34. And if you do some additional coaching and some additional, depending on what you're doing, you can, as you alluded to, take the assessment and you can get your top 10. And there are some things you can do where you're going to get all 34. But the reason initially that they did not want people to see all 34 is that, what do? Naturally, we go to our 34th and we're like, well, bad at that. I'm terrible at that. Which is actually the second thing I love about the assessment, CliftonStrengths, is that we have all 34. So even when we look at that 34th one, we yeah, we can say, gosh, a minus focus. Wow, yeah, I can be really distracted very easily. Like if I see something move, whoa, what is that? Or I'll go down rabbit holes. But I still have focus. I can get things done. So you wouldn't want to look at that and go, well, I don't have it, so don't expect that from me, right? Or I know I've had colleagues who have a very good colleague that I worked with really well who had Woo was their 30, and it was great because we worked so well together. So you can bring out, right, the strengths of other people. You don't necessarily, I say all the time, we don't want a world where there are a bunch of woos, because we drive each other crazy. It would be overwhelming and too much. So we really want that ability for people to be different and embrace those differences. And the things that show up in our top 5 are typically the ones that come naturally to us. And we don't even know that they're strengths because we just do it. And other people, to us, it's just ordinary. And to other people, it's extraordinary because it doesn't come naturally to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. That was a beautiful way of explaining why, just the structure of it, but also why the assessment focuses on strengths and not so much our weaknesses, which I don't even think Gallup says they don't even look at it as a weakness. It's just, you have all 34. It's, to what extent do you have those?
Yeah,
Gallup advocates for career well-being using Clifton Strengths. Can you tell us a little bit about the 4 E's?
definitely. Yeah. So this is that place where you're considered to be in the strengths zone when we're looking at the 4 E's. And I have to always look at my, like, reminding myself what they all stand for. I love alliteration, but especially because one is E's, EASE. So
Yes.
things that we do so when we're operating our strength zone, when we're using our strengths, even if we don't realize it, we're operating with excellence, which is one of the key attributes of using our strengths, is that when we can basically be near excellent. Ease, so it comes naturally to us. We enjoy it typically. So we're in this space of, I like what I'm doing right now. And then energy, we typically gain energy from it. So it's not going to drain us. We're going to feel more energized because of it. And so when anybody, right, and without even taking the assessment, this would be kind of fun, by the way. If you haven't taken the assessment and you're listening to this, think about the last time that you felt like that. Like, when were you in a place? What were you doing where you felt like it just came naturally? You were enjoying yourself. You were performing pretty well with excellence, and you felt like you had really high energy. And so those are places where your strengths are probably at play. So for me, that's when I'm leading something or helping others. And one thing, and this is like the next level of strengths, but all of 34 strengths roll up into those domains. And so when we think about like what domain that you're in, you could kind of think about that perspective as well. So mine roll up to influencing. And so if I'm doing anything where I'm influencing, I feel very connected, which again could sound fake, right? Like, and I'm not influencing has taken on a whole new thing, right? The past maybe 10 years, I'm not an influencer, but I find I naturally influence. And so when I'm doing something where maybe it's on social media or connecting with others or leading a session or participating in a book club, right? I'm feeling those things. I'm feeling like I'm in the strength zone. How
Yeah.
about you, Sarah? Can you think of a strength zone opportunity?
Yeah, for me, it's relating. That's my big one. Most of my strengths, my top 10 will roll up to that. Leighann, I was going to say, yes, being an influencer has taken on a very different meaning. But if you think about everything you just said with like excellence, ease, enjoyment, energy, to me, a lot of it just comes down to your energy and how you show up. So you influenced me so much in that very short time that we spent together. I think there were like 20 people in that group, right? There were like at least 20. I don't even remember. It was a while ago. But you stood out to me so much that I was like, I want to keep talking to her. I want to keep like working with her. I want more opportunities to work with her. And so I think when we think about influence right now in our world, we think about it in terms of like who has the most like followers or likes or whatever. But there are people out there, and if you're listening to this, you could be one of them, that you just automatically, like you're very magnetic and you attract people to you. And it could be that you have that influencing strength. And we can all probably just take a minute to think about all the people in your life that really stand out, or like someone that you met that you can't really put your finger on it and you have no idea what their strengths profile is and you don't know anything about them, but you're like, wait, that person made some kind of an influence or influenced me in some way or made an impact on my life by just showing up and like being themselves, just who they are. And I think that's the key with strengths. Is like when you're operating in your strengths, that's what you end up doing. That's the energy that you're sending out. And so Leighann, in our, training, you did show up very much like a leader, and it wasn't annoying or obnoxious or anything. You were very, I think, strategically and tactfully kind of jumping in where you were needed and helping out and speaking up. And I think you definitely stood out. And I think that speaks to your ability to influence.
You, Sarah. And I love that you reached out and were so, you were like, okay, can we do this? Can we do this? And I think that speaks to your relationship building because you value those connections and it's very clear. And I remember that right away. Just like I think when we were in some of our breakout rooms or small groups, you just very naturally, very comfortably relate to people. And that shows.
Thank you. Yeah. One of my my favorite things that I do is teaching. I'm a coach, so coaching and teaching are my two things that I love doing. But even when I was, in human resources roles, the feedback that I usually got was like, you're really good with like people. You're really good at making people feel seen, making people feel heard. So if you're listening to this episode and you're like, well, I haven't taken the StrengthsFinder assessment, right? Or CliftonStrengths assessment. I still call it StrengthsFinder because they were StrengthsFinder for so long.
Do you think?
If you're someone who has not taken it yet, think about the feedback, the positive feedback, the trends in the positive feedback that you get. What are people saying about you that you do very well? Are you someone who can drive decisions at work? Are you someone who is really good at figuring out the strategy? Are you someone who's really good at, getting work done? Execution, right? And so I really encourage everyone to take the assessment and work with a coach to understand your results, because that's so helpful. But even without taking the assessment, start thinking about what are the things that you can do, or what are the things that you've been told you can do that maybe to you, like Leighann said, come so naturally. And they probably come so naturally because you're having a good time doing them. And in our culture, unfortunately, we've been taught that work is supposed to be the opposite of fun. Something to think about. When you're operating with your strengths, I think you are supposed to be having fun at work.
And
Yeah.
fun is different for every person, right? Like some people find it fun to analyze spreadsheets. That's not going to be me. But some people enjoy that, I mean, that's what I love. That's beautiful that you just said that, because it is so individualized.
Yeah. And I think that's that's a whole other discussion, but even that is so hard to understand and embrace, is that what you're good at is supposed to be very different than other people. Like you said, what kind of world would we be living in if everybody had woo as their top, right? And so I think that's one of the very valuable things that you get out of this assessment and out of working with a coach on this, is really understanding how are you unique and how are you able to show up and shine in your uniqueness and still get work done and make money and find a career that matters for you or is meaningful for you. Leighann, you work with students using strengths, and I'm curious, how do you help people understand, students especially, because you're kind of in the space of what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And we live in a world that, you need to make money and you need to do really well, and success is defined for you in so many ways. What has your experience been like working with strengths to help students understand that their uniqueness it has a place in the world?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think what happens most of the time when students take the assessment, it's a little heartbreaking, because when they will take it at first, they'll say, wow, I've never really been told what I do well, or I never really thought about it this way. And one thing that I have thought was very powerful, I won't say enjoy necessarily, I think because of the way that it comes out, is that typically when people take the assessment and they realize like, oh, wow, this thing I thought was a quirk or something odd about me, or something that other people maybe have said that's irritating. So, for example, somebody who asks a lot of questions, they're asking like, well, why are we doing that? Or what, can you help me understand the purpose of that? Or maybe they don't even frame it that way. They just seem like they're being really nitpicky. Potentially that person has input or analytical in their top strengths, and they're leveraging it. And so they're just trying to understand that's their go-to that comes naturally. And quite frankly, we all need a little bit more of that in our lives. Somebody questioning, well, tell me more about why you're doing this, instead of just doing something for the sake of it. And so it helps people reframe often when they maybe have seen something about themselves that they didn't necessarily think was a strength. And it's really important too, if I say this often, is that even somebody that you maybe don't like, they have strengths as well. And so it's really helpful to think about their strengths and what those strengths might be. And sometimes we are seeing the shadow side, or we're interpreting their strength as a shadow side, when really that's them showing up as a strength. And so we have to understand, is there a way I can relate to this person differently once I understand that they're coming from a place of their strengths? So I think that's the biggest thing, is just seeing how people sort of have this aha moment. Now, I have seen people as well who get their strengths, and sometimes they are kind of not very pleased with one. It's not, I've never seen it up to this point where somebody does it, and they get them and they say, this is all garbage, or I don't agree with any of it. I have never seen that. But I have seen like, what? I don't understand this one. First, the one that I think is hilarious is there is a strength that's relator. And when people see it, they will say, like, no, 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 that's a job. So that one's confusing for people because relator is they really love to connect with people in that one-on-one a lot of times, which can go with woo, by the way. People often think, well, you wouldn't get relator and woo. No, I've seen that where people have it in their top. And that's just somebody who loves connection. They're going to just be connecting with people all the time. But the other one is harmony. When people get
Mm,
harmony in their top five, a lot of times they have to sit with it for a little bit and they say, what the heck's going on with this harmony? I don't have no conflict, or I'm not always trying to be a peacemaker. And they're probably just really aware of that. So that is one where, and I love that you talked about before the importance of working with a coach. Because if you just take the assessment, and that's a great start, that's great. Take the assessment, start to think about it. But working with a coach will really help unpack how it's strengths are never in isolation. So we're not ever just talking about one strength. It's you've got to do that to first learn about it, but it's really how your top five interact and show up. And so that working with a coach who can help ask some questions and dig a little deeper is really impactful.
yeah. Yeah. I work with this a lot with teams, and it's such a powerful tool to use in a team setting because, to your point, you know, even people that you don't like have strength. I like that how you said that. A lot of especially in the workplace, right? Workplace dynamics can be so sometimes very prickly, right? Sometimes a little spicy. And it's so easy to forget that what you're seeing as a weakness is actually someone's strength. It is something that your team needs. It is a lens on the problem that your team really needs, that you're not seeing it as a necessity because you don't value it as much as other people do. Or you might not see the benefit in it because you're looking at it from a completely different perspective. And so having the strengths framework to be able to speak to each other, like I've been on teams where I'm like to your point, like that person's input is coming out really strong right now, and that's necessary. And that's a great way to even have a conversation or start a conversation. Like, hey, I really value your, strength, your input strength here. However, I don't know if it's needed to that extent right now. Or we might, using your stove example, like maybe we turn up the input a little bit today. Or hey, I want to turn up my maximizer here, and I'm curious if we can do this better. So just even the language that we use and using this language in the workplace can be so helpful to really prevent conflict, I think.
Yes, that shared language is so important. And I remember when I had a supervisor, and this is again where we were using strengths quite a bit with our team and overall. And this supervisor, something didn't happen that they had wanted to do, and they said, "Oh my goodness, I am really, really feeling this because my discipline, they had discipline in their top five, and it stood out to them much more than it probably would to somebody who didn't, because they felt like they didn't follow through on something that they were talking about. So yeah, team dynamics, there's even a grid. You probably utilize the grid where you do the
Yeah.
team grid, and you can see each person and their strengths and even their domain. And that's so helpful. Such a
Yeah.
helpful visual.
Yeah. I do use that grid a lot, and what I end up doing with it when I'm doing team coaching, so I meet with individuals and then I meet with them as a team, not like every week, like once in a while we'll meet as a team to do like a team building event or workshop. But when I meet with the individuals, like sometimes people will be like, this person did this thing today and like I don't know how to address it or I don't know how to talk to them about it. So we really lean into the strengths language, and I'm like, well, what strength were they really showcasing in that interaction? Or what's a strength for you that was coming out really strong that maybe was causing you to see the situation in this way, right? And so it's really, really helpful for people to start kind of intentionally collaborating in just more intentional ways. I think it's super helpful.
Definitely.
Leighann, how do you address this idea that focusing only on your strengths might mean that you're not ignoring the growth areas or the opportunities that you might have?
Yeah. So a couple different ways. One, once I learned this, I thought, oh, that makes so much sense. Gallup actually defines a weakness as something that gets in the way of us performing from our strengths. And so what that means is it's a weakness only if it's preventing us from operating from that place of excellence. So for example, if I'll just go back to my focus example. If I am doing something and well, let's just say woo and positivity, I'm supposed to be working on a task, but I get distracted from talking to somebody else. And I'm having this conversation. And to me, there's some purpose in it. There's some purpose that's going to come out of that conversation. But because I've had connectedness in my top 5 before, which is everything happens for a reason. And I really relate to that. However, maybe I get derailed to the point that it takes me off of this task so much that I don't get it finished and there was a deadline. That's going to be an example of a weakness that's getting in the way of my strengths. It's getting in the way of me performing with excellence. And so that helps me understand I don't need to just sit here and think about all the ways that I can improve my focus. That will not help me. I will never be excellent at focusing. And so that's something, there are some different examples you can do in metaphors. Sara, I can't remember if we did it in our training, but the handwriting, write your name. Like when you write
Yes,
your name,
we
did we do
did.
that one? Okay.
Yeah.
So just for people listening, if you were to sign your name with your non-dominant hand a couple of times, let's just say 3 times, you would probably not like it. It would be a little painful. It would be awkward. And that's what tends to happen in sessions. People are complaining while they're doing that. And then you switch to your dominant hand, you sign your name 3 times, and it just is natural, it's effortless. You're doing it, you don't even think about it. And I'll start with that. How did you feel while doing both of those things? And almost always there's those negative emotions with the non-dominant hand, but then the dominant hand, people are like, I didn't really feel. I just did the thing. Well, that's where we are when we operate with strengths. So weaknesses, so yeah, can we improve our non-dominant hand signature? Sure. But what is the point of that? If we're already operating with excellence in this other area, and I know it's a very physical example, but that's how we use our strengths. So if we're already operating from excellence, can we refine that just a little bit? And of course, Sara, to you and I, this comes super naturally with Maximizer because we're doing that anyway. So how can we take that and think about that? Yeah, to your question, some people might say, oh, it's just so toxic positivity or whatever. No, that's not it. It's not saying we're not trying to improve. It's just saying, and again, back to our culture, we're obsessed with that weakness fixing and trying to perfect everything. There's no point in doing that because we're not going to be good at everything. Nobody is going to be good at everything. We're great
Yeah.
at everything. Definitely not.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for saying that. I absolutely agree with that. I think that thinking pushes this narrative that we all have to fit into a box. We all have to fit into a template. This whole weakness fixing culture that we have, it's a lot of it is about, well, yeah, let's ignore the stuff you're actually uniquely good at and let's focus on what you're not good at. And so you can be more like someone else or be more like the way that society wants you to be or your workplace wants you to be or other people want you to be. And it's never about how you are unique. Like, let's focus on that. But we don't do that.
Yeah. And to your point on that, I just want to say that 1 in 33.3 million people will have the same top 5 strengths in the same order, which is a wild statistic to me. That the chances of you meeting somebody else that has even the top 5 in different orders, but I think that one's definitely lower. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but 33.3 million people. We probably wouldn't like that person because we'd be too much alike if we did meet somebody with the exact same top 5. But that's why, again, to your point, that's the beauty of difference. And that's what's really cool about this assessment is that there is, statistically speaking, with 34, there's just not a high chance that you're going to have somebody that has the exact same.
Yeah. Leighann, what is one practice that someone could start today to live more aligned with their strengths?
Yeah. Well, first, I think it's just exactly what you called out before. You said it beautifully, and that was to start thinking about where people have told you things that you're doing well, right? Things that you're good at, things that are potentially strengths, And then taking the assessment to learn the language, because exactly again, to what you were talking about with teams, when you start to learn the language, things can shift. And so it does start with one intentional thing at a time. So it can be overwhelming at first. Again, when you're looking at them and going, okay, well, I listened to this podcast and they talked about all five and how they interact, and I have no idea. Start small, right? Start small. Start with understanding and learning what each one means, and then you'll start to see those connections. And it might just be at the end of the day, where did I feel the most energy today? Where did I feel like I was operating in this zone of, yeah, that really felt good. And when you do that, then you'll start to see this pattern emerge. And that's really what your strengths are when we're operating with our strengths. We are operating at optimal alignment, right? We're operating from a place of doing our best. And that separates this assessment from others where a lot of times those are personality based, and it is hard to change our personality. But this is about how we show up in the world. And really, a lot of that is behavioral. So there are things we can do differently once we understand what we do naturally really well.
Yeah. I will also add to that, if you're someone who has taken the assessment and you kind of put it away, filed it away because it was like a work event or a workshop. I know we do that a lot, or like, okay, well, I just had to do this little team building thing and it doesn't matter in that moment or whatever, right? If you've put it away, take it back out. And especially if you're not in a good place with work, if you're stressed out, if like work is being, heavy, if it's heavy right now, take that out. And I would recommend thinking about, like Leighann said, where are you actually using those strengths? Are you using those strengths? Because that is your zone of excellence. And if you're not operating within that, then something needs to change. And I'm not saying your job needs to change. Maybe it's a perspective, maybe it's the work that you're doing or the how that you're doing that work. But I would say if you're someone who's done the assessment and kind of put it away, take it back out and see what's happening right now in your life and how you can apply your strengths to it. Leighann, if you could leave our listeners with one takeaway about unlocking their potential through strengths, what would it be?
Well, I think it's the awareness. And you mentioned it earlier as well when we were talking about just being self-aware. I think so often, and most of us have at least some level of self-awareness. But when you take the assessment, you start to become even more aware of how you show up in the world and, of course, how others show up. But you really start to think about, oh, this might be why this person sees me this way. And one example I'll give, and this was in the most, actually in our certification, Sarah, when I saw all 34 of mine, I have command is number 10. And command is one that can be kind of intimidating. And I was reflecting on, I have received feedback throughout my life about, wow, you intimidated me at first. And I had to really sit with, is that a me thing or is that an other person thing? Is that something that I need to do anything about? Really, that was really my first question to myself. Do I need to do anything about this? And when I sat with it for a while, which is really the thing that I would encourage folks to do, is sit with that feedback that you get and decide, is this something that I even want to change? Is this authentically the way of showing up? And that's what I where I landed was that's authentically who I am. And if that's me being me, then to me, and when I've talked to people about it further, like, oh no, it's not you. It's the way that I felt about myself after interacting with you or something like that. And then they said, but once I got to know you, I was definitely less intimidated and all of that. And so I think it really is about reflecting on that self-awareness and the feedback that you get from people and determining if I make adjustments, am I going to then not be showing up the way I really am? And if you're not able to show up the way you authentically are, to just what you said before about operating from that place of excellence in the strength zone, then maybe it isn't the right fit for you anymore. And when I say that, what I mean is job, relationship, even volunteering. Maybe you've been doing something for years just because you've been doing it and you feel like you need to continue. But maybe it's not, maybe things have changed and it's not where you're operating best right now. And we all need to say no to some things to say yes to others.
Yes, absolutely. I just want to say I am so happy that you shared that example because I don't think we sit with that question enough. Like, is this a me thing or do I even need to fix this? I think we hear feedback and we immediately go, oh, I've got to fix it. And so just taking that pause and being able to sit with it and say, is this something I need to fix? I think even that is just so powerful. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Definitely. And sometimes the answer is yes, by the way. You know? Oh, no. Sometimes the answer to do we need to fix it or not is yes, right? We might decide we do want to fix it. And so in that case, then, okay, then there are a couple of things that we could tweak. Back to that. Is it getting in the way of my strengths?
Yes. Back to your point, it's about that awareness. Thank you so much for sharing that example. And Leighann, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your expertise and for all the work that you do in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. It was a pleasure to spend time with you. And like I said, I think we could do it for hours more. So this was just a great way to talk more about strengths and how we show up.